So you can probably tell by the red nose that it's really, really cold outside here in Tasmania tonight. My hands are frozen, but this will have to do for this evening. So I wanted to make a quick comment about cancel culture. As you've probably noticed, there's a letter that was posted in Harper's Bazaar, I think it was, which was signed by 150 different media people and university, academics, and Noam Chomsky and transphobic J.K. Rowling. I'm sorry to throw that in there, but that's true. It talks about various things, but I wanted to actually step away from that letter and talk about how algorithms are actually the real cancel culture for the left, for small YouTubers like me, for independent left journalists, for socialists, for anyone who is speaking out against US imperialist wars. You're going to get algorithms crushing your channel, and also this also includes people who talk about Palestinian rights. And Rania Khalek, who is a independent journalist, she posted something on Twitter which basically said as much, that she's been cancelled over and over and over again because of her views on Palestine and on apartheid Israel, and also imperialist wars. It's verboten to talk about that, and you won't get invited to any mainstream media channels to talk about imperialist wars. It's just not going to happen. I'm probably one of the very few on that list of people who was complaining about cancel culture. Probably Noam Chomsky is probably the most valid in a way, because he has been ignored by the mainstream media for decades because he talks about imperialism. And let me preface that by saying I don't agree with everything Noam Chomsky says, because he's supported US imperialist aims in Syria for some reason. So I don't support everything Noam Chomsky talks about, but he's been a very important writer over the last few decades, for a long time now. And he's been ignored, basically, and sort of cancelled by, the powers that be, because he's talking about inconvenient truths. And so the mainstream media, which often are just stenographers for the national security state, the U.S. national security state, they don't want people like Noam Chomsky talking about U.S. imperialism and regime changing all over the world. 50-plus countries, governments have been overthrown by the U.S. since World War II. You won't hear any analysis by Noam Chomsky on any mainstream media. Have you noticed any? I haven't. And you certainly they won't be inviting Max Blumenthal or Ben Norton or Rania Khalek or Anya Parampil or Abby Martin. Any of those people, you won't hear them on mainstream media because it's inconvenient what they're saying. And it's exposing the truth of the US empire. And it's an empire because it has 900-plus bases all around the world. One doesn't need to be literally cancelled because of saying one particular thing. You can be cancelled with all of this, the algorithms, the ignoring by mainstream media. The algorithms are probably the best form of censorship online. And literally, these algorithms scan your video for keywords, and if those keywords are met and they're not on the tick list, the OK list, then your video is not really going to get much attention. And, you only have to, if you use Google, which I don't, but if you use Google and you search for certain things, you're going to get all the usual suspects that are supporting the US national security state, and anybody else is way, way down the search list, like 20 pages down, and most people don't go past the first one, even 2 pages. So that's a great way of censoring and cancelling people who have very important things to say, and there's so few of them who are actually pushing against imperialist wars that are killing millions of black and brown people around the world. And if the so-called liberal pretend left actually cared about black lives and was really into supporting black lives and saying that they matter, they would be against imperialist wars, because what are US black people more important than the black and brown people being murdered by the thousands, by the millions in Iraq, Afghanistan, in Syria, in about at least 7 or 8 countries or more? And if they're not directly involved, the US, they're getting other people, other forces to do their dirty work for them. In fact, in Africa now, there are dozens of US bases in Africa. In Latin America, there's constant meddling. So if we claim to care about that, then we should be anti-imperialist, anti-war. And a lot of people kind of know that it's verboten to talk about those things, and they don't want their profits interfered with. I'm talking now about people who say they're on the left but never really talk about U.S. imperialism. But anyway, this, and also cancel culture. Just talking about what these people on that 100, one of the main things that some of these people like J.K. Rowling are talking about. J.K. Rowling is using her platform, which is a very powerful platform, and she's literally got, a huge supporters because of her Harry Potter books. And J.K. Rowling has been using her platform to promote anti-trans misinformation and disinformation. And a lot of people are pushing back on that, including the cast of Harry Potter. I think it's Emma Watson and, God, what's the name of the guy who's the main... See, I don't really watch those movies, but Daniel Radcliffe. Okay, so those two have actually come out to separate themselves from J.K. Rowling. And you can't separate J.K. Rowling and her franchise because they're just so closely bound together. And she doesn't like the fact that people... And she claims that trans activists, I don't know who she's talking about, anybody can pretend to be a trans activist and say violent things to her, just so that it can be reported. But she says she's been given rape threats and all this kind of thing. She's not only promoting misinformation and disinformation, but at every moment she's smearing trans people. Okay, so that's another topic for another time, and I've talked about this. I talked about this a few weeks ago. It was a long video about it, so check that out. But J.K. Rowling deserves, in many ways, for a lot of her supporters to dump her, because she's just spreading hate and she's spreading all sorts of misinformation. So I don't know, there's a whole bunch of people on this list, like Fareed Zakaria, who's a CNN host, and I don't know what he's been worrying. I don't think he's been cancelled for anything. I mean, CNN is a news group that is will only interview people who are supporting U.S. intervention, U.S. meddling in other countries. So this whole list of people, and I'm not familiar with all of them, but this whole list of people that are on that letter, it's just, I don't know, it's kind of, I just find it sort of like, it makes me laugh when I see people complaining. They're like, a lot of these people have really high profiles, right, already. And it's not going to break them if some people say cancelled. They're still going to have a huge platform like J.K. Rowling. So I'm really not sure. And why is it that people with high profiles and academics are only talking about themselves? What about all these other people who just, the algorithms basically censor what they're saying, which is much more valid than what J.K. Rowling has to say about trans people, much more, and it's not spreading hate. In fact, it's trying to reverse this awful imperialism that is destroying people's lives. So there's all these different echelons of what those people think are important, and leftists, real leftists that are trying to address imperialism will always be cancelled online and in the mainstream media because we're saying something inconvenient. And I'm just a tiny little channel. I'm unimportant, tiny, but there are really important people, leftist journalists who are in some cases risking their lives, like when Abby Martin from the Empire Files and her partner Mike Preisner went to Venezuela at the height of those violent riots. and they got death threats, and they had to flee the country because they basically were almost like on a hit list, really, from the opposition there. These people like that are the real heroes, and they deserve to be the ones that... There's a little Paddy Melon in the background there, and he's having a bit of an altercation with another Paddy Melon. These people, Abby Martin and the like, who are really addressing one of the most unpopular topics in the world today, imperialism, they're the ones that are the heroes today, and they're the ones that are the algorithms and the mainstream media and all of that. Everybody, all these forces are doing their best to try and make sure that their voice is never heard. That's the real cancel culture, the one that needs to be talked about. But it won't be talked about because we have a lot of Western governments who are just subservient to the U.S. national security state, and we have corporations, 6 main corporations owning all the media in the United States, and the Murdoch press here owning 75% of the media here, and they are totally fine with U.S. imperialism. They benefit from it. They profit from it. The weapons industry do advertising on their news sources all the time. So you will never hear anybody pushing back, any of those people pushing back. They're part of the censorship. They're part of it. And that's the real cancel culture. And that's what we should be talking about, all of us. All these social media platforms that support U.S. imperialism and they support the apartheid state of Israel, that's the real problem. So let's not get too wringing of the hands about this letter. I'm sorry about Noam Chomsky being censored all these decades. That's really unfortunate. And I'm not sure about the rest of those people on the list. But that's not going to change any mainstream media inviting Noam Chomsky on to talk to them. And the people that are wringing their hands the most are the ones that are quite happy that Rania Khalek has been cancelled by the mainstream media and she's not going to ever be invited on. And, they're the ones that are wringing their hands the most about this recent letter are the ones that are have the most to gain and are part of the gatekeepers of the real information about the national security state and the U.S. imperialist wars that are destroying many countries now in the world and is the greatest threat to world peace, the greatest purveyor of violence, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, in the world today.